All right. Let me see. I think we should be good and going. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis Misigoy, Libertarian, running for the U.S. Senate here in the state of Florida, doing our usual weekly live stream here on Thursday. Yeah, that's what we're back doing. Trying to think what big announcements. Not big announcements, nothing too big. I am going to be down in Miami on May 10th, where we would usually have the county affiliate meeting for the Libertarian Party of Miami-Dade. So anybody down south, Miami-Dade or Broward, anywhere in the area, want to come out and join us, I'll post details for that coming soon. I have them, but I've got to pull them up somewhere over here, and that is, but it's going to be in Coral Gables. So for those interested, just plan on being free that evening. That's May 10th. Let's see, getting into stuff, current events and whatnot, or maybe not so much current events, but at least some the sort of genesis of certain debates that have been happening lately, particularly here within the state of Florida, that have actually led to other sort of bigger news stories, I guess, when dealing with specific entities. But sort of the genesis of a lot of those has been stuff to do with education, and something I've given some thought to, as I recently saw another clip where it was a few folks discussing another story, and I don't recall what state this was in, but was I think it was a cheerleading coach, where there was getting into a bit of trouble regarding praying before, I don't know if it was some kind of competition or what it was, but this obviously within the context of public schools is, causes some sort of questions and issues and whatnot, and it's interesting when we kind of look at this, and I in particular, in terms of thinking from a libertarian perspective, the fact that I really don't want there to be a culture war. I recall actually hearing on a call maybe a year or two ago, probably not that long ago, but one of the first times I got on the social media sort of platform Clubhouse was a big libertarian gathering with some bigger name folks from the party having a discussion, and one of them made the point that, well, I want to end the culture war by declaring a truce, and people can live their way and we can live our way, and everybody can be free, and that's what we want in a free society, and that's certainly what I would like to see be the case. But the question is, in some part, how do we get there? How do we get to being peaceably able to live according to our own values without forcing them on anyone else, and avoid all the pitfalls and stuff that we have? Because I think in principle, a lot of folks in this country, most folks in this country, want to believe that that's what we're working towards, but we seem to run into these stumbling blocks, and I think one of the big ones is public education. Now, I'm a former educator myself. I taught in public schools for 4 years at the high school level. Worked as a substitute a little bit before and after that. Worked for a very short stint in adult education. And I'm a product of public schools myself as well. So I'm very sympathetic to public schooling in a general sense, and even I would say sort of the basic goal of saying, well, you want every kid to be able to get educated. A kid's ability to be educated is a kid's ability to be educated, or opportunity to be educated, shouldn't be dependent on the circumstances or choices of their parents, or whatever that may be. And so that's certainly something I can sympathize and agree with. But the question is, how do we get there? And I think one of the things that should be obvious, or at least apparent by now to more folks, and hopefully we get to a majority recognizing this, is that having actual schools themselves be run by government is a problem, because it always becomes fertile ground for these kind of wars to begin, for these kind of conflicts, and it's nothing new. Some might be forgiven for thinking that the kind of debates we're having right now are sort of new, but they're not really. It's the same kind of thing going back to, folks arguing over teaching evolution or creationism in public school science classes, or sex education, whether abstinence only or comprehensive, teaching them about contraception, things of that nature. That's still even focused on teenagers. Today, it's recent debates have been about critical race theory, or about things like this, like discussions about gender identity and whatnot. In particular, with the bill that was recently passed here in Florida by the state. Certainly, and some of this is maybe a little bit less relevant to me, and it's part of why I don't talk about it quite as often, just because as a candidate for federal office, and as a libertarian and someone who also believes in following the Constitution, the federal government has no legitimate authority over education. So for me, policy-wise at the federal level, it's a very simple thing. The federal government just shouldn't have any say in it. Washington, D.C. shouldn't be making any policy vis-a-vis education. It shouldn't be giving away dollars that have already been taken from all of the states through taxation and giving them back with strings attached to say, well, you got to do this and that, whatever, to get it, to sort of control education in one way or another. None of those sort of things should be happening. So from that level, it's something where I don't have a whole lot of, I'm not running for an office where it's going to necessarily delve into the local issue and really how education is delivered to folks, or to kids and made available. But I think it's still a discussion worth having, because it is important that folks understand, and we want to remove as many impediments. And the waste. So much money gets spent per pupil across states and in various areas, counties and whatnot, and we don't see the results. It's almost an inverse relationship. I don't think it truly is have an adverse effect to spend more. I think obviously there's things you want to be able to have, and things that do need to be spent on, but the question is, what's the best delivery mechanism, or what's the best mechanism to get that opportunity? And I think most of us who are paying those taxes, and most of us just in general, whatever maybe your political leanings are, I hope you still recognize that what we pay for in education is for the purpose of educating the kids. It's not about running a school system if they're not educating kids. It's about helping the kids get educated, and that's really the bottom line. I think a more ideal situation to meet the goal would be allowing just ending government-run schools, as radical as it sounds. It doesn't really make sense for governors and legislators to be determining what is going to be acceptable within the school setting, what is going to be what's the word I'm looking for? What the curriculum is going to be. It just doesn't make any sense. And I say that having been a former educator, I never really ran into any of this sort of thing. I was teaching math, I was teaching computer programming, so this sort of stuff was a real non-issue for me. But where they do run into these sort of issues, and you do really need to have involvement and buy-in from the parents and everything else, it really doesn't make any sense to have these government entities so far detached. And I'd even go as far as saying, with regards to the school systems and the county districts and everything else, which again we see, and certainly we've seen through the COVID era, with a lot of these standoffs over mask mandates and whatnot, that there is, again, a disconnect between those government entities overseeing public schooling and the people that they're supposed to be serving, the families that they're supposed to be serving. And so, but again, it goes back to the question of whether even that should exist. I would argue that if we allowed, and again, I can't foresee every eventuality, but if you allowed every existing school that is currently public to essentially begin functioning as a private entity, you kind of transition them over to that. Now, they could certainly still be free to reorganize into a district if they find value in that sort of association. But that means that some of the money that is allocated for these students, which then goes to the school to provide them with the education they need, that means you're agreeing then to take some of that off the top to fund this district. And the question I would wonder, I would be skeptical, or I would not expect to see, is that when they do the math, that they would find that that district provides, that level of administrative oversight provides sufficient, what's the word I'm looking for, value to justify the cost that's coming out of it. When you actually put that in the hands of the folks who are responsible for the kids' education, I think they might find less value in having a school board and district overseeing them than we might otherwise, or then certainly the government does, and when they organize these things and try to provide structure around it. But like I said, this is where they find fertile ground for culture war issues. The debate, well, that's a whole nother one too. Actually, a question or comment that came up over here in terms of, again, I was simply talking about the money within the education being able to go with the child to whatever school they want. Again, if every school becomes functioning privately in the sense, then whatever school they want to go to, that money can be applied towards that. And obviously, I know one of the things that always comes up has to do with transportation. If somebody doesn't, or in particular, if somebody doesn't live in an area with a good enough school where they can, some of that money, whatever that overall amount is, it doesn't necessarily need to be all going into the school. Perhaps some portion of it would be covering transportation where there's a need. Most folks I know, or that I worked with, like I said, as a former educator myself, I didn't really come across that many people who had complete wanton disregard for the students, that just wanted them to, and it's not to say that it doesn't exist out there, but I also have family members who are working in education today, so it's not what I see. So I think they would be, in general, willing to work with them if there really were situations like that. But also, in terms of just doing your own thing, whether that be homeschooling groups or other things along those lines, private tutors, etc., all of the other many ways in which education can be delivered. It was actually interesting, as this kind of segues maybe into a little bit more of a federally relevant topic, is the issue of student loans, which has come up again. With student loans in particular, we're talking again about, and this gets into discussions about the government subsidizing education in general in its various ways, but certainly in terms of what's already been happening, how the market has already been, what's the word I'm looking for, manipulated or imbalanced by the availability of student loans, which have led a lot of young, unwise, 18, 19-year-olds, maybe some 17-year-olds, to sign on the dotted line to take out huge loans to go to college, pursue degrees that weren't ever going to earn them the money back, and now we're in this situation where, okay, here's this debt crisis and it's affecting all these people. One of the things that, let me take back, because there was a couple thoughts I had, and I keep skipping between thoughts, and I've not taken enough time to really nail them down. But the way that we're operating and the way that system has operated has just been a disaster. It's been a disaster for so many of the people involved, and certainly for the kids who get caught on the hook for this stuff. They were at least kids when they made the decision to sign on the dotted line. And a lot of us can say, and I certainly agree, that it certainly would be unfair to put that burden onto others who didn't get the benefit of the education, or folks who were able to, who stayed within their means and still got an education, but did it. More the point that I look at with this particular issue is the fact that by the solutions that are floated about for the student debt crisis, and this is typical for a lot of problems that government tries to solve, is that the solutions that are proposed really do nothing to address the root cause. And in this case, the availability of these kind of special loans that are able to provide whatever amount of money to people who really don't have any perceivable way to pay it back in any reasonable amount of time. These very specialized kind of loans that were incentivized and created and made possible through government policies because it became the government's policy to try to push everyone to go to four-year university and to make that the standard. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that this isn't something that just naturally occurred. This isn't something that is, as much as some might want to believe, a product of market forces. It's not. It's a product of government intervention, government programs, working specifically to try to push people, everyone, largely, down a specific path that doesn't make sense for a lot of people. And or that a lot of people weren't necessarily ready for and weren't willing to make the right decisions for, weren't prepared to make the right decisions for, certainly weren't given the consideration. And they've been sent a lot of bad messages. And this isn't limited just to the government. This is, I think, a cultural thing. Whenever anyone says, just do whatever you want to do and follow your heart and study whatever it is you like, that sort of thing can work out very well and be very nice and easy if you're giving that advice to someone like myself, who was always inclined towards technology. Always had an interest in computers and programming and stuff. For me, that worked out very well. But for a lot of people, if your passion is literature and some of these other things, certain kinds of political studies or whatever, there's maybe not necessarily quite as many opportunities. And certainly if you're going to take out tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that you're going to be on the hook for and really can never escape, if that's what's going to happen, then it probably doesn't quite make that much sense. But it only ever made sense because the scales were tipped in a particular direction. And we had this sort of just madness infecting the general mindset that it had to be this way and that anything was worth it. But again, it's also it's somewhat predatory because of in the same way that military recruiting, there's such a focus on young people who really probably can't appreciate the consequences of and the obligations that they're signing up for in many of these cases. They lack the judgment for the same reason why rental car companies don't rent people cars until they're 25. Now, I'm not suggesting we raise a age of consent to 25 or anything like that, but I am just saying that in a regular marketplace, I don't think you're going to see, without any government influence, without any of these additional forces sort of pushing for it, you're not going to see $50,000, $100,000 loans being made to 18-year-olds to go to school to study who knows what, and just wait and see and hope that they pay you off over some ridiculous amount of time. It's ill-advised and it wouldn't occur naturally within the market. So a couple of these education thoughts, again, from a former educator, just thinking about what the impact a lot of these have and have had. So let me see. Couple other random thoughts. I'd looked earlier this week, just a couple thoughts with the likely Republican and Democrat of the race. On the Republican side, our incumbent Senator Marco Rubio, a good friend of mine, Eric Parker, who's running for city council in Jacksonville. He gave him a chance. Wrote to Senator Rubio's office, trying to advocate for support for marijuana legalization federally, with the legislation that has come up recently through the House and then going off to the Senate. And Marco Rubio wrote or his office, whomever, but we assume that this reflects his views because it comes from his office and it's got his signature on it. This nice little letter that, basically saying that, well, maybe medicinal stuff, and only if it's rigorously tested and approved by the FDA. And, it really highlights the difference between, this kind of boilerplate standard Republican response on this sort of issue versus the Libertarian view. The Libertarian view is not that you need a federal, unelected federal bureaucrats like the folks in the FDA or stuff like the ATF or whoever to approve what you're able to own, what you're able to have, what you're able to consume. These should be your decisions. And in particular, when you're talking about, in this particular case, obviously as a libertarian, we believe in decriminalizing all this stuff. If you're not violating someone else's rights by an action, then that action should never be criminalized. And certainly that's true. An action such as possessing something, the mere act of possessing something does not harm another person. The mere act of consuming a substance does not harm another person. The act of growing a plant in your home or on your property doesn't cause harm to anyone. It doesn't violate anyone else's rights. And in particular, in this case, where at this point there's broad enough acknowledgement that there is medicinal value to cannabis. Okay, and when you stop and think about this for a second, you have a plant that has beneficial health benefits, medicinal properties, and the government has worked tirelessly for decades to prohibit and, let's say more in general, restrict access to it, whether that is through regulation or prohibition. What does it say that a plant could be as free as possible, because anybody can grow it and have it and produce their own, and they're basically growing their own medicine. But that's the thing we work to limit. That is the sort of thing that we go out of our way to restrict people's ability to do. How moral can that be, where we are restricting people's access to, a plant that provides them benefit, provides health benefits to people, even if you don't necessarily agree that that's in all cases, and you're not a fan of the recreational use. It's mind-boggling how anyone can still defend that, but he does, which is not surprising, again, because he, as I would say is the typical Republican view, believes that, again, in the omnipotent government that has the right to decide what you're going to have, what you can own, what you can consume, what you can do, and they get to decide whether something is good, and then they give you permission. And that was also part of his response as well. And if you haven't checked, I believe I have it posted on all my social media accounts, so you can see the letter there, and a bit of my response on it as well. It's not about this idea of government approving. We need to divorce that notion. That's something I talked about. I posted a video that was out earlier this month regarding my views on cannabis policy. And I think where I sort of, I don't know if I want to say differs from all libertarians on this, definitely not from all libertarians, but especially from non-libertarians who are really advocating cannabis legalization. One of the differences with me is that I really want to divorce this notion of this is good from making this legal, because at the end of the day, it is about whether you're violating someone else's rights or not. What you're doing, we shouldn't have to accept that what someone else is doing is good, especially not good for them. The idea that, and certainly something we should have learned through all the COVID era, the mandates and all of this stuff, everything else that's gone on over the last 2 years in particular, is that government doesn't really have a good sense. They're not a reliable arbiter of what is good for us or not. That's something that there should be a keen awareness of, hopefully by this point. So that's what I think. I hope everyone maintains perspective on when they look at this issue. And And it really boils down to whether you believe in freedom, because freedom involves people being able to do stuff you don't agree with or don't think is good. But again, as long as you're not violating someone else's freedom, you need to be free. And that's at the core of my beliefs and my policy positions as well. So questions over here, helping with the campaign. Again, let me get my hand over it, see if I get... See, this is the problem. I'm looking in too many places. Over here. The URL is over here, misigoy.com. If you visit there, I think I can also pop in the donate one over here on the top. Again, but the button's there on the website. If you can contribute what you can. You can also sign up to volunteer as well. I need to get folks a little more organized. We got some more people signing up. As well, in terms of events, I need to post stuff on the website as well. However, I'm going to be down in Miami on May 10th. Trying to think if I've got specifics beyond that. Planning to also in the end of May for the FPEA, I believe it is, the homeschooling conference here in Central Florida. I'm going to be hanging out for that. We are planning, I don't think we're set in stone yet, but we're looking at trying to do an anti-war event in on June 4th in Brevard. So trying to make some things happen, get out there a little bit more, and yeah, those are some of the events. Probably trying to look at do a little bit more, maybe a little more out there in terms of fundraising as well. For well, I don't have something concrete to announce at this point, but that's some of the stuff that we're doing. So those are a couple events. Need to get posted on the website, so I apologize for not having that stuff up. But those are things that we're gonna have coming through soon. But May 10th is the next thing. That's gonna be down in Miami. So in Coral Gables, if you for those familiar with the area who want to come out and join us. I'll get that posted soon, and we'll also have it on social media as well. So that's that stuff. Let me see. So I was giving Senator Rubio a hard time. So I would be remiss if I didn't also give our likely Democrat challenger Val Demings as well. I just couldn't help myself from kind of shaking my head and getting aggravated looking at an image of her presenting a big old check, over $1 million, $1.2 million, to the Orlando police. Orlando police, same ones that she was a police chief of for a number of years, and worked for, obviously before being police chief, for upwards of 20, I think almost 30 years. I'm not quite sure the breakdown of that time, but very long time police officer here in over in Orange County. And what am I missing? And one of the things I really like about this is that there's this gigantic check for $1.2 million for updated body cams. Now, I don't know the state of body cams for these police departments. Body cams seem to me to be pretty new technology, so I'd be surprised that they're going that obsolete that quickly. The biggest problem we have with body cams is folks turning them off. So maybe if we're giving them new ones that don't have off switches, maybe that's the idea. I don't know. I certainly haven't heard anything to that effect, and I would really be surprised. I haven't seen Congresswoman Demings advocating things like, repealing, getting rid of qualified immunity, and real serious reforms like that. But the thing that really irks me about it is that this is a check for over $1 million coming out of the U.S. Treasury. And up in the corner, it's got her name and logo on it. But she ain't the one paying for it, It's coming from us the taxpayers, okay? We're the ones who are forced to. For those of us who are regular working stiffs like myself, who work a regular job, you don't even get a choice. You don't. They take it out of your paycheck before you even receive it. The money that your employer has decided, hey, this is what I'm willing to pay for everything that this guy does. And part of that goes to your benefits, but the other part of it goes to Uncle Scam, gets shipped off to the IRS in DC, and that's the money they have. And then they give this money out to whomever, could be private entities, could be government entities, like in this case with the Orlando police. And what do? Then they go out and take credit. Their name is on the check. As they come with this $1 million check. And they slap their name on it, but they're not the ones paying for it. If they want to put their name on the check, I'd like to see them take that money out of their own account. It irks me to a great deal, and I hope it bothers other people just as much, because it epitomizes this style of governing. We take money from the people, and there's never going to be your consent. They're not interested in your consent. It's theft. Okay, the whole thing. If it wasn't taxation, if it wasn't theft, they wouldn't need to do it that way. You'd be willingly giving it. And anyone who says that they're happy to pay their taxes, look, there's not a one of them alive, I don't believe, who if you offered them, hey, here's a special card. You have this card for the rest of your life. You never have to pay taxes. Every single one of them would take it. And you know why? Because even if they like some of the things that government does with their money, they know that they could keep that money and then give it away to somewhere and get it done better. And instead of and not having to pay for all the stuff that they don't want to do. Because let me guarantee you, everybody can pick out stuff that government's doing that they don't like. And yet everybody accepts it because then they have other things that they want government to do. This goes to that sort of old quote from Bastiat from the book The Law. If you've never read it, I highly recommend it. But he says, government is that great fiction by which everyone endeavors to live at the expense of everyone else. So everybody gets taxed into this big old pot. They give us a little bit back. They give those other guys a little bit back to pay for whatever it is they want. But and try to keep everybody happy. All the while, they take their cut each time, and they want you to appreciate it. They want you to thank them. They want you to appreciate them giving you back less of your money, if you get any of it back, or spending your money on something you wouldn't have spent it on. They want you to thank them for that because they were such benevolent rulers. Again, this is no different than, like I said, this idea of the omnipotent government. It's their defining their worldview. They own it. They are owed it, and we should just be thankful for it. And I have a different view. I believe that what you earn belongs to you, and you should be able to hold on to it. Put it to you this way. This would be the least controversial. I would hope it wouldn't be such a controversial idea. At the end of the day, I don't know that realistically I could see, the complete end of taxation in my lifetime. I don't know that part is as conceivable as I'd like it to be. But would it be so bad? Would it be so bad to have a government that at least did such a good job in the things that it did that people were willing to voluntarily pay for it to do what it does? Would that be such a bad idea? That you didn't have to take it. That was a way that occurred to me a while back in a previous conversation. I think consent. So, an interesting question over here. I thought all laws have to be based on consent. It's a question of how many people do you need consent from. Again, this is a question of how much can government do. Can 51% of the people agree to, or forget even 51%, let's say 75%. Can 75% get together and vote to say we're going to pass a law against X, Y, or Z, which doesn't violate anyone else's rights, and which the 25% would object to. So, and my simple answer to that is absolutely not. And the reason is this. We believe that the power of government, and this is an American idea, I believe a core American value, different from the old world mandate of heaven kind of thing that the Republicans and Democrats believe in, which is this. It is that the power of government, the authority of government, comes from the people that they're governing, right? We say consent, but really it has to come, the people have to vest that power in the government. Okay, well, what legitimate authority and power do I have that I can vest in it? Really, it's limited to defending my own rights, my right to my life, my liberty, my property. Those are the things that I have a right to. So I can vest those rights into government to say collectively we're going to maybe organize a force to be able to uphold those rights in some kind of organization. No, not a social contract. A social contract is complete garbage. It's not a contract in the slightest sense, but I'm going to save that for another time because I'm a little past time here. But getting to this point, we'll talk social contract another time. I'll make a point of that. But the if I don't have the power to decide what you're going to eat and drink, or how big your house can be, or any of these sort of things, if I can't decide what kind of plants, if I have no right to decide what kind of plants you're going to grow on your property, bringing it back around to the beginning, if I'm not going to decide what you put in your body, if I don't have the right to do that, how can I vest it in government for anyone else? I can't. And that's the crux of these sort of issues, and so that's why, yeah, this is yes, it would be great if these folks and all these bureaucracies lose their job. I have full faith that those folks who have the great capability, a lot of highly educated, skilled people who are wasting away in these government jobs, I would love to see them, again, there'll be a short-term pain, but I would love to see all those people scooped up by private interest companies and everything else, and be put to work on stuff that's productive, that's going to actually improve the lives of people. Not having these these crazy, super smart engineers sitting in the basement of the Pentagon trying to invent some rocket that is never going to be, that's going to cost $1 trillion and never going to be used. I would rather they be working on stuff that is actually productive and is going to make people's lives better, whether that's some simple consumer gadget or just a way to do something cheaper, deliver energy cheaper, whatever it is. But that's not going to happen with them working in government. And so, yes, lose those jobs. We want to get rid of those. Those are the kind of jobs we don't want to have. Yes, no. There's another great Bastiat quote for that. I don't have it handy, but what is it? If the natural tendencies of, I think I might have it. If the natural tendencies of man are so bad that he cannot be allowed to govern himself, then how is it that the tendencies of these organizers are so good? Do they not also belong to the human race, or do they think themselves are they made of a finer clay than the rest of humanity? I might have paraphrased that a little bit. All right, guys, I'm past time. Thank you guys for joining me. I will be back next week. But follow me here and on all social media. Twitter is probably the thing I'm most active on, but if you catch stuff on Facebook as well, obviously, and Instagram as well a little bit. We got the post with Rubio as well on all those. And I will talk to you guys next week, May 10th in Miami. Thank you guys for joining me. I will, like I said, be back on next week, and stay safe, and yeah, man. Thank you again.